So I'd like to start off by saying we're going to have one session this evening is going to be on the conflict resolution with Wolf Smith. That will start as soon as we get through with the call to order. I want to do a roll call of the DFOB new board members to make sure they are here for this training session. So um, let me start off with uh, Kwame Gay, Usman Gay. I'm sorry, I finished my thing. Usman Gay, Usman Gay, not present. Uh, Let me check and see how whoever else is there because I want to make sure. Okay, Usman Gay is not there. Let me give a few more. I'm looking at the list of people that are there, and I see that some of the new board members are not there. So let me give it about another 2 or 3 more minutes. So it's 5:06 now. It's at 5:10. We'll start up for certain. Thank you. Well, it is now 5:10. Notification did go out to all of the board members, the COB and the DFOB board members of this meeting, so we must proceed. We have a conflict resolution training with Wolf Smith this evening. Let me do a roll call of the DFOB new board members. Usman Gay, Usman Gay, Kanika Harper, Kanika Harper,
Present.
The COB new board members, Christine Brooks,
Present.
Jennifer Whitaker, Derek Kilgore,
Present.
Keith Rose, and Harrison Sand.
Present.
Okay. So that is the roll call for this evening. I'd like to start the training session. As I said earlier, we're having a training session this evening on conflict resolution. And so I would like to turn it over to Wolf Smith.
Awesome, thank you. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for being a part of this. For those folks who've been around for a little bit, not necessarily for the new board members, you may recognize me from past trainings. I will say that the legislation has changed since CRC last did this session. So the ordinance that kind of talks about mediation has changed. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So this is going to be a little bit different than what you may have seen in the past. So I'm actually going to share my screen. Well, I'm going to submit a request to share my screen. Great. Okay. So are folks now able to see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to be using this presentation to help guide us. The presentation will be about 45 minutes. There are pieces of it that will probably be a little more conversational. If at any point you have any questions, please use the chat feature, stop and ask me, whatever is easiest. So like was shared before, my name is Wolf Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Conflict Resolution Center, and we are the Community Mediation Center for the City of St. Louis. So kind of just very briefly in terms of who we are. So community mediation centers exist around the country. And what we are is community members that help folks within our community resolve conflicts peacefully. So first and foremost, we're members of this community. I live in St. Louis City. All of our members, all of our volunteers are from St. Louis City or St. Louis County. So we are all from the region. We're very familiar. We're part of the communities that we help folks work through conflict on. So we are parts of this community. And part of what we know is that whenever you put a lot of people together, there's going to be conflict. So I'm sure that many of us can understand that if we didn't have to interact with other people, we'd probably live relatively conflict-free lives. But unfortunately, we're social creatures. So conflict is just a part of who we are. But what that means is if conflict comes out of community, then the only way for us to resolve conflict effectively is through community. So what that means is helping to rebuild relationships, helping folks get the tools to work through conflict, and learn how can we become better because of the conflicts that we experience. So I'll talk a little bit more about the types of things we do on the next slide. So there's a few, these are our overall services. So whenever folks are asking, like, what does the Conflict Resolution Center do? I think a lot of people think of mediation as the one and only thing. But I think what most people actually find that we do above and beyond is we listen. Whenever folks call us, one of my colleagues says they don't call us for ice cream, right? So whenever they call us, they're going through a difficult time. We listen, we help them know that they're not alone, and we help them process what's going on. We do offer mediation. So I'll talk more about what mediation is, but broadly, it is a third-party neutral facilitating a dialogue between two or more parties who are in conflict. We also offer a service called conflict coaching. This is a relatively new service to the field, but what it means is it's a one-on-one conversation with a trained mediator and coach who helps the person talk through their options, explore what they want to do, and plan for what comes next. This can be done prior to mediation or as an alternative to mediation, say if one party refuses to engage in mediation. We also do a variety of training. So this is kind of a training, but a lot of the trainings that we do for our community are more focused on conflict resolution and how to resolve conflict, as well as de-escalation skills. So we're regularly out in the community doing those types of trainings. And then lastly, we do offer facilitation services. We are able to facilitate certain challenging meetings, especially town halls neighborhood dialogues, those types of things, in order to make sure that a neutral person is able to help guide the conversation, especially whenever some members of a group may feel underheard or undervalued within a specific setting. So I'm going to talk about the types of conflicts that we're able to resolve, and then we'll get much more deeply into the conflicts that you all see and how we support those. So one of the big ones is that we are the primary, or we are the contracted mediation provider for the city of St. Louis. So that means that all employees of the city of St. Louis, including its subdivisions, which includes, all the standard subdivisions, but also city county offices, treasurer's office, sheriff's office, as well as the board of alder people. Anyone within that sphere who works within that sphere is able to use our mediation and conflict coaching services at no charge. So if someone's having a conflict with a colleague or with a supervisor, depending upon the case type, there are certain exceptions, but we're able to provide them with support as part of or separate from the standard grievance process. So some of the common ones that we work with employees on is relationships with coworkers and supervisors, questions about fairness and consistency, say someone's not feeling treated similarly to a colleague. That does not include, for example, EEOC type complaints. And then lastly, physical work environment and working conditions. We're able to help kind of create a conversation, especially if someone's having a hard time navigating an expected work function. The next piece or kind of category that we work with is neighbor or roommate. So this is what we often call our community mediation. And this is, like I said a little bit before, centers across the country do this type of work. So we help people have conversations and resolve conflicts related to a wide variety of community-based disputes. These are some of the most common examples. So shared property lines. So we're not necessarily mediating like real estate functions as much as, say, you and your neighbor have a tree on the property, on your shared property line, and it falls down or it's dying and you have to cut it down. Then oftentimes neighbors might bicker about, oh, well, who has to pay for it? Those types of things. So we can help provide conflict resolution and mediation support in those situations. Barking dogs are relatively common. Parking situations, especially St. Louis has a lot of shared driveways between two properties. I know there's several on my street. And oftentimes people can get into conflicts about, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to navigate that? Certain types of property damage, if it's small property damage, especially as a result of shared use, then that's something that we can work on. And then noise situations. So especially as we're looking at, sometimes neighbors can be rowdy, but also roommate situations where they have different expectations about noise levels. We can help mediate in those conversations as well. And then our last kind of broad category that's separate from the work that you all do is our landlord-tenant work. This is this is our largest program, and we mediate a wide variety of conversations between landlords and tenants in order to help them improve their relationships and in order to help prevent evictions. So some of the common topics that come up there are security deposit, issues around maintenance or repairs, rent, especially if someone's behind. One of our most common agreements is repayment plans. So how do we get caught up, especially if someone lapsed for a month or two? And then lastly, we do mediate conversations around structured move-outs where the parties say, this rental relationship isn't working out, but I need more than 10 days, which is what you have in once you get a court order. But I need more than 10 days to move out. And the landlord's like, okay, I'm willing to do that. And so we help them kind of come up with that. Okay, what is the date for you to move out by? What are the expectations around that? So the next piece that we're going to talk about is civilian police mediations. Before I move into that section, which is, really the bread and butter of how you all will be interacting with us, does anyone have any questions about anything I've covered so far? Great. Awesome. Well, like I said, if at any point a question comes up, you're welcome to unmute yourself or you're welcome to type in chat. Oh, looks like chat's disabled. So you won't be able to use that feature, but you can always unmute yourself and just ask the question. Oh, and sometimes people ask about the closed captioning feature at the bottom. That's an auto-generated feature. So none of it's being recorded on my end, but obviously the city's recording this as an official meeting. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about the Division of Civilian Oversight and Mediation. I'm going to talk just briefly about the history because it does inform where we are now. So in 2017, there were two big pieces of legislation that were passed within the city of St. Louis. So relevant to this field, at least. The first one was the creation of the Community Mediation Service. So that was the original funding stream that led to Conflict Resolution Center becoming what we are now, as big as we are now. Before we were just volunteer run. So in 2017 was really the formation of that. So when that happened, one of the other things that the Board of Alder people did was pass this other ordinance, which was related to the Civilian Oversight Board, Civilian Oversight Board before the DCO was kind of finalized in its own separate entity formation. So what that means is whenever these two were happening at the same time, they were actually both pulled originally from the Ferguson Commission report as two different recommendations, and they were pulled together at the same time. So when this was drafted, what they said is that mediation was allowed at any time during the process, and just so folks are following along, I'm on the second paragraph. At any time during the process, the Civilian Oversight Board or Police's Internal Affairs Division may recommend to the complainant, the police department member or members who is or are the subject of the complaint, and the commissioner that a complaint be mediated. So there's a few pieces here that were really important. Number one, that the recommendation could go to multiple people, and number two, that the recommendation came from either the Civilian Oversight Board or the police's Internal Affairs Division. Okay. The next piece of this, if the complainant, the police department members who is or are the subject of the complaint, and the commissioner agree to mediation, the COB process shall cease, and if the complaint is resolved through mediation, the complaint shall be classified as having been resolved through mediation. So what that was saying is, if all of these folks agree, right? So the first process is around recommending. The second one is if all the parties agree that mediation is appropriate for this particular case, then the COB process halts temporarily, because if the parties go to mediation, they're able to reach an agreement or resolution, then the COB closes out the case as marked resolved through mediation. It does not go away completely, but it doesn't have a further investigation. And so that's entered into the file of the officer as well as for the COB's records. Okay. And then the last piece of this, any resolution through mediation must be agreed to by the complainant, the police department member, right, and the commissioner. If a resolution is not reached through mediation, the COB process shall be reactivated. So basically, as I shared, as I was saying before, all of these folks have to agree to the resolution. If so, it gets closed out. But if not, the COB process can continue. So why am I starting in this previous ordinance? Why am I sharing with you all this history? Well, there was a bit of a mix-up whenever the Board of Alder people was reauthorizing or shifting some of this language in 2022, and mediation was removed completely, actually. And then in 2023, they realized, oops, we accidentally removed this whole thing that gave the COB and DCO the authority to provide mediation as a resolution. So they added it back in, but when they did, they wanted to give more flexibility, and they wanted to allow both the Civilian Oversight Board and the Detention Facilities Oversight Board the power to create a practice or policy for a mediation process. So they basically said, we don't feel that we want to make this process for you all. We would rather you all come up with a process that works for you all, because you all are the ones that are seeing different types of cases. You all are the ones that are representing civilian input whenever we're looking at these pieces. So one of the reason I started with the history is because there's not a whole lot of guidance in the current ordinance about what that process looks like, right? So what it says here, rules and procedures for the Civilian Oversight Board it gives the DCO powers to create rules and procedures for the Civilian Oversight Board and Detention Facilities Oversight Board to recommend to a complainant, Civil Oversight Commissioner, Commissioner of Police, or the Commissioner of Corrections, depending on which is implicated, and the police officer or corrections officer that is the subject of the complaint, that a complaint be resolved by mediation if the Civilian Oversight Commissioner, the appropriate commissioner over the complaint, the complainant, and the officer that is the subject of the complaint agree to mediation. So it includes some of those same elements of it's optional and everyone has to agree that this is what we're going to do, right? But it doesn't actually talk too much about what that looks like, what the process looks like, or even whether or not mediation and the process of pursuing mediation effectively pauses the COB or DFOB process. So all that to say that out of today, you all will be receiving something of an assignment, which is to create these rules and procedures collectively. Okay. I did share below at the very bottom of this page, you'll see this little box image. It says your complaint may be eligible for mediation. Please indicate if you would be interested in allowing a mediator to hear your case. This will not disqualify your complaint from COB review. And that is pulled from the current form that is still on the website. So that's the same form that we provided support on, I think in 2018, and that is still on the form itself, at least on the website. So that was one tool that's been used historically in order to give complainants the particular ability when they're submitting their complaint to say, yes, I would be interested in mediation, or no, I'm not sure. That being said, it was not uncommon that one of the things we heard from past folks, it was not uncommon that someone would say no at this stage, but once the investigation progressed and mediation was offered again, they would say, you know, I've had a little bit of time since the complaint was first issued. Actually, I think I'd be open to mediation. So just something to keep in mind, that when folks are really quite riled up, that oftentimes they'll deny mediation, but then later on they'll say, actually, mediation might make sense for what I'm going through or what I'm hoping to do, especially if someone's feeling that they'd like to have a conversation with the officer, which we've heard is not uncommon. So any questions about the statute? I know I went quite deep into this, but and copies of the slides will be shared, and this language from the legislation is in the ordinance that you all have. So any questions at this stage?
I have a question. I was just wondering how often mediation was actually used in these. You know, did it happen often enough, or was it rarely used, or did most go to mediation? I have no idea.
That's a great question. So we have mediated one police civilian complaint this year. Prior to COVID, they were mediating somewhere between 5 to 7 a year, if I'm recalling correctly. And I know that, yeah, of course. And I know that the history about when things have been, you know, the complaint process has been kind of structured right and all those things. I'm not going to get into the political history of that, but I know that that has a big play on how many cases we've seen over the last few years. Great. Thanks for the question. I'm not seeing any others, so I'm going to move on. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to join or to chime in. So some of the common types of interactions that are recommended or considered best practice within civilian police mediations across the country are particularly nonviolent interactions. So if a situation involves some type of physical force or violence, it may not be appropriate for civilian police mediation. So some of the types of interactions that we've seen most effective and are considered best practice are, number one, rudeness or lack of respect. So for example, one of the complaint we've mediated this year involved a situation related to property damage, some minor property damage that occurred. And the person who had property damage felt that she really just wanted an apology from the officer. And so we were able to help facilitate that. Felt that she wasn't treated respectfully during that interaction with the officer and really wanted to have that conversation. And so we were able to help them find a successful resolution. The second one is perceived bias. So this can be helpful if someone believes that an officer has stopped or interacted with them because of some type of bias. So whether that's racism, sexism, or related to the way that they appear, those can be effective strategies to have that dialogue with the civilian and the officer. And then the last one is someone who feels that they're being followed or excessively policed. So not necessarily if they're experiencing excessive policing on a systems level, but if they're like, you know, whenever this officer is in my neighborhood, they're always following me and I just don't understand why, this can be an opportunity for them to have that conversation with that officer. So these are ones that we recommend. What I would say is, as you all are thinking about and crafting the policy or the procedures, that, you know, feel free to reach out to me and we can have a conversation about other types of cases that may be a good fit. So I'm going to give you just a little bit more information about what our process looks like. So number one, all of our mediators on these cases are volunteer mediators, and they're all from St. Louis City. So that's set out by the ordinance that's created for us. They do receive additional training on bias, and specifically around the bias between, like, bias related to officers and civilians. This also includes power imbalances and a model called transformational mediation. So if you've been through mediation before in like a divorce or a civil case, this is not that kind of mediation where we're trying to find like, what's the number, right? Instead, this one's more about how did you tell me about how you felt during this interaction? Okay, so do you recall this interaction? Tell me about your experiences. So it's much more experiential, much more relational, and more about building community. And like I said, our volunteer mediators are specifically trained, and they're all trained in what's called Rule 17, which is Missouri's rules regarding mediators. We do use a co-mediation model if the parties have different key identities or identities are at stake or related to the mediation topic. We aim to have folks that mirror as much as possible the identities of the two parties involved. Obviously, that's not always an option, but it's something that we've heard in particular whenever someone has had an interaction with an officer who looks different from them. Having a mediator that looks similar to them has been impactful at making them feel safe and heard within the setting. So like I said, we're focusing on transformation, more that relationship orientation. And then lastly, we do build relationships with police leadership and internal affairs division to help expedite cases. I know that you all have different types of interactions with them. So especially as we're thinking about those next steps after the policies and procedures are created, that's something that we'll continue to build upon, which is how are we continuing to be in relationship with the police so that we can help expedite those cases, and that police have a good understanding about why should I mediate? What is the advantage for me, right? Those types of things. So that's a little bit about our overall structure. I'm going to talk more about mediation specifically, since not everyone may be familiar with mediation. So if you are, I apologize, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So at its core, mediation is, one, completely voluntary. So no one can or will be forced to mediate, and that's really important. Number two, it's a facilitated conversation, and it's guided by a trained neutral mediator. So we do a conflict check when we receive the names of both parties. Whenever we're sending that to the volunteer mediators, we say, okay, here are the two parties involved. Before we share anything about the case, do you know either party? And they might say, you know, yes. And if so, we'll say, okay, then we'll find a different mediator. But if they both say no, or if they say, you know, I need more information, with more information, they're like, no, I don't know this person. Then they get to move forward to make sure that they really are able to be neutral. The process is entirely confidential. So again, this is set out by state rules, but anything that is shared leading up to or within the mediation is confidential and cannot be entered as evidence into a court of law. The only exception that we make for that is if there is an unresolved serious threat of violence within the moment, we may break confidentiality to get someone else involved. We have never had this happen since we've started mediating in 2017. My colleagues have never had this happen who've been mediating much longer than that. So we carve out that exception, but I've never heard of a situation where that's become an issue. So The process is mutually controlled by the participants, so we support them as they're moving forward. We help to guide the process, but our role is not to tell them what to do, what to say, or how to say it. We do not force people into agreements. We don't necessarily even encourage agreements. We really are focused on how are we building this dialogue, how are we hearing each other, and how can we reach a mutual understanding, even if that mutual understanding is, at the end of the day, we just had different expectations about how this interaction will go. So it's held in a neutral location, so we usually host them at our office. Since COVID, we've started offering those on Zoom. Apparently Zoom has been very popular so that folks can mediate from the safety of their own homes or from their own offices. So we rely solely on the choice of both participants. And then on average, our sessions are 1 to 2 hours. Police civilian sessions tend to be closer to about an hour and a half. So, and we don't tell the parties, hey, we're out of time at an hour or anything like that. That's just what we've found in our experience. So they tend to be about 90 minutes. Any questions about what mediation is?
One thing I just wanted to point out that I thought was very good is that, it not going to the court actually allows people to apologize. Because I know sometimes lawyers will say, even if you want to apologize for something, you shouldn't apologize. And this can actually allow someone to get that apology they wouldn't get through going through a different process.
Yes, so that is correct. And what that also allows is if someone wants an apology like in writing, then this is actually part of resolving the conflict. So the matter becomes settled. So number one, the apology can't be used in court, but if the officer or the police department is worried, like, hey, right, I'm nervous about this, then that can be part of how they're approaching the quote settlement agreement, right? Which is really just, what are we going to do now? And does this resolve the issue at hand? Yeah, thanks for that. I will say also, I am an attorney. Our programs director is attorney, so we're very mindful about the legal implications of these things. Most of our mediators are not attorneys, and that is somewhat intentional, especially for these types of cases. So I'll talk just briefly more about what the mediators do and don't do. So we're listening, we're guiding the process, we're asking questions, we're focused on confidentiality and safety, answering questions about confidentiality and safety, both before and during. We do help draft agreements, but note that we do not actually draft the agreement itself. So we're supporting folks in finding the language. We may even be writing for people, but we're not like, oh, well, maybe what this means is this other thing, right? We're not doing that as much as helping make sure that they're on the same page about how they want that agreement to be written down. We're encouraging party dialogue. We separate person from position. So I don't know about you all, but if you've ever been in an argument with another person before, it's pretty easy to be like, you're the worst person ever, right? And that's not really productive to fixing a relationship. If you've ever, fought with a friend or family member or spouse, it's very unhelpful to be like, you're awful, right? That doesn't actually fix the conflict. So we try to help them be like, okay, how can we rephrase that? Focused on what behaviors were done and how those made you feel, right? Focus more on that dialogue. And then lastly is we normalize conflict. So I would say that's probably one of the biggest things we do at CRC. We see conflict every day. You all experience conflict every day. When people come to us, they feel that their conflict is the biggest, worst thing that's ever happened in their whole lives. And it's usually not. Right? Usually it's part of their journey and it feels awful in the moment, but we're there to help them remember that, yes, this feels overwhelming, but you don't have to go through it alone. So some of the things we do not do, we do not take sides, and so we do not advocate. We do not create solutions. Sometimes people come to us and they're like, help me fix this problem. And we're like, we will help you talk to the other person to fix the problem, right? But we do not fix the problem ourselves. We don't share information that's pulled from scheduling. So let's say whenever we're reaching out to the complainant and the officer says, actually, I remember this person and, they pulled a knife on me. Okay, this case is no longer eligible for mediation from what we've learned, but we do not tell the complainant the other party refused mediation because of the knife situation. So confidentiality starts before the mediation itself. And again, mediation is always voluntary. We don't judge, so we're not arbitrators. That's not what we do. We don't collect evidence. We don't review. Sometimes people are like, hey, look at this thing on my phone. We'll be like, so rather than looking at the thing on your phone, how about you tell me about it and how that impacted you, right? So just shifting how we're encouraging that dialogue. And then we don't give any type of advice, including legal advice. So like I said, some of us are attorneys. We're very intentional that we are not our clients' attorneys. So this is just a cute little graphic that we have about the mediation process. We do a peer mediation program in schools, and we found that actually this program that works well for young people has been very effective for folks of all ages, so we still use it. So the overall process, number one, parties agree to mediate. So before the process is happening, we're having dialogues with the parties to help get them to that first stage. Once that first stage happens, then we can move into the mediation itself. So that's where the mediator helps open things, kind of start that dialogue, and sets very clear ground rules about what we are going to do, what we're not going to do within that space. Number two, each party shares their side of the story. Our role in that space is to listen and to help the parties not interrupt each other. That can be really challenging. Folks always want to talk, but we let each party go uninterrupted for their portion so that each person gets heard. So we do a little bit of mirroring in that situation. What I'm hearing is what you just said. It sounds like that made you feel. We help work with the parties to try to come up with win-win solutions. So especially if we're hearing that the two parties are saying something similar but phrasing it differently, we may help them. What I'm hearing is this is a point where you all are agreeing. We help the parties evaluate the options, make sure that the parties agree on what's reasonable. So sometimes people may say, we want to do this thing, right? And maybe it's not reasonable with the resources available. So especially if the civilian's like, I want $50,000 from the city. The officer can't approve that, right? So that might be a situation where we would say, is that feasible with the resources that you all have within the room? And then lastly, we help the parties create and sign the agreement. So all of our agreements at the end do get signed. Historically, for police civilians mediations, when an agreement was reached, we did not share originally we did not share the agreement back to COB, but with the changes, it's possible that might be part of what this looks like. So historically, we would complete a report that says mediation was held on X date. The parties, both parties were present. The parties, quote, mediated in good faith, and then the names of the mediators that facilitated the dialogue. So we can talk more about that at a future time, if and when you all are ready for that. I did want to also just briefly mention conflict coaching as an option that we have. It falls under mediation, so you all could offer conflict coaching to complainants or officers when you're creating the process. Mediation, so just know that, but it's not something that's inherent in the legislation itself. So conflict coaching is an alternative to or an effective tool before mediation. It's a one-on-one session with a trained mediator and coach. It has the same rules around confidentiality and being voluntary. It tends to be more informal, so the person sharing what's going on, the coach is listening. We're helping them explore goals, and we're helping them explore solutions, and then we're helping them say, okay, here's a solution you've identified. What does that look like in practice? And then one of the things we've found is that it can often help solve a dispute without having a third-party involvement. So sometimes whenever two folks are having a conflict, sometimes one person just needs to talk about it, especially if the other person doesn't know they're in conflict. So sometimes conflict coaching can be an effective tool to prevent needing a mediation altogether, especially if someone just feels really unheard. That can be a helpful tool. Again, none of our services are legal advice. Excuse me. And last but not least, this is our website, and this is where folks...
Excuse me.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Before
Please.
you go on.
Yeah.
Regarding the conflict coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a requirement for all parties to agree to mediation in order to have conflict coaching?
That's a great question. It is not. So
Okay.
conflict coaching can be offered when one party refuses mediation, at least
Okay.
our rules. The rules that you all create, you all are going to have flexibility on what that looks like. So, but for our purposes, let's say a complainant, let's say an officer refuses mediation. For our purposes, we would be willing to take the case and offer conflict coaching to the complainant. Even if even if the officer has said, I'm not going to mediate, but the complainant said, I want to mediate. So this could be a service that you all could continue to offer if you choose.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about conflict coaching before I move on? And this will be my last slide, so I promise I'll be within my 45 minutes. Great. So then last but not least, this is our Get Help page. So this is where we ask folks to go whenever they're sending over a case. For you all, I know that the process between the board and the the two boards and the DCO is a little bit different, but in general, this is where folks get sent whenever they're looking to receive mediation or conflict coaching services. It's a little form that we have folks fill out. In the past, we had a special form with DCO. Back before it was called DCO, right? So we did have a special form that we worked with them on. So this, I would say that in the interim, while we're still having dialogue, this would be a place that you can send folks. I know that you all are residents of St. Louis, so if you have neighbors that are fighting, if you're having a situation, you're more than welcome to come to our website and use our services. All of our services for neighbors, civilian police, and landlord tenant is completely free for anyone who lives in the city of St. Louis. So I hope that you will consider us and use us for services, both for civilian police complaints, but also just generally while you're out in the world and experiencing conflicts with your community. I hope that you'll continue to keep us in mind. So, and again, the slides will be shared with you after, and I know that the legislation was already shared. So with that, this is kind of a more open time for any questions that folks have. So yeah, I know that some folks have been sharing throughout, but what other questions are folks still thinking about or pondering over? I'm going to stop sharing my slides. No other questions?
Well, Wolf Smith, this is Louisa Lyles. It appears that no one has any additional questions. You did an outstanding job. I'd like to thank you for the presentation this evening. I'd also like to say that if anybody has any additional questions in the future, please feel free to email the civilian oversight, and we can make sure that those questions are forwarded over to Wolf Smith, and that way any issues you may think of or something you thought of the last minute for its conflict resolution will definitely be answered. I'd like to thank your organization. I've been with the organization since 2016, so your organization has been always a part of the civilian oversight and has been helpful in the past. So I'd like to thank you and thank your organization as well.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for your service. I know that you're not paid for this. It's much appreciated. Yeah, so thank you all for having me. Thanks for letting me be a part this evening, and I hope you'll have a great rest of your evening.
And before you leave, Barb, do you have anything you want to say at this time?
Not I'm not going to offer any like advice about how this interacts with the state statute or anything. No.
Okay, thank you. Okay then. Thank you very much, Mrs. Smith. And um, do we need to go into a closed session for any particular? Anybody having any legal questions they need to ask, or as the board members go? Because we do have time in order to do that if need be. There's no additional questions. So at this time, that would be the end of this training session. There will be additional training sessions in the future, so you will be getting some emails for upcoming sessions in December. Um, so at this time, um, this meeting would have to be training session will be adjourned. It is now
I
5.
have one question for you. Next week there is no training. We have that very short week of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so that there's nothing next week.
Well, as it stands right now, as a matter of fact, you did bring that up. There is uh, a there is a training session. Good thing you said that. There's a training session that's scheduled for Monday, um, the 25th. That is something I've sent out a notice to the members uh, wait a second. There will be a notice going out to the members for the training session on Monday. It'll start at 4 o'clock, and then we'll have one from 4 to 6, from 4 to 5, and then there'll be another one from 5 to 6. It'll be involving human resources and also investigative practices from the police department. So that will be on Monday. So there will be for those who will not be able to attend that session, just like this one was recorded, that session will be recorded as well.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
This is Jennifer. Excuse me. One, has there been any time scheduled for the miss meeting? And secondly, for individuals that miss those meetings or missing any of this training, what impact will that have on the board, if any?
Okay. All the sessions are recorded, so we have we'll make provisions for individuals
Okay.
to have the opportunity to view those recordings, and even those who have sat in on those sessions, if they want to review them again, they have that opportunity as well. So
I appreciate that.
that's something to be afforded to both the COB and the DFOB board members. And then, like I said earlier, if you have any questions, you'll have the opportunity to also be able to forward questions to the individuals. The training session on Monday will be from 4 o'clock to 6 p.m. And the first training session will be on civil service rules and employee rights. They'll be presented by Human Resources. And then the second will be on best practices on investigations. And that training session will start at 5 o'clock, and that will be presented by the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department.
Miss
Okay,
Lyles. Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
That's
I was
okay.
just going to ask if that was the one that was rescheduled for Monday.
And no, it was no, that was not a rescheduling to my understanding, but we did have the session on Monday, this past Tuesday, I should say. I'm getting my days mixed up. This past Monday, that whole session was completed at that time. But this is an additional one for the investigations, in which they're going to have with Sergeant McCraw and also Lieutenant Jesse Harris will be presenting that. So you'll be getting the agenda with the link, and they'll also be put on our web page as well. So individuals who will want to attend that session will be able to do so.
Okay, maybe I'm confused because I know we completed the one with the first sergeant. I don't remember his name. I remember, but then there was a second one that was supposed to start at 5, and that person had been promoted or something like that. So
Oh yeah,
that's the one.
you're talking about yes, you're talking about Lieutenant Brown. So you are correct. I stand corrected on that. That is the one that's going to be presented, and that would be the person who's be over internal affairs department will be doing the presentation. Also, the second in command too as well. So that'll
Okay,
be doing
thank you.
on Monday. So let me reiterate that so everybody know, because I know the holiday is coming up. On Monday, the 25th of November, the time frame will be from 4 o'clock to 6 p.m. The first session will be on civil service rules and employee rights. That'll start at 4 p.m. And then at 5 p.m., we'll have best practices on investigations, which will be presented by the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department.
Thank you.
Miss Lyles.
Yes.
I was unable to make it to the Monday training. Is
Okay.
this the training you're saying half of has to be rescheduled?
Well, the second half did not take place because the individual for the Metropolitan Police Department was promoted, so that someone else is doing that presentation. The first half that you missed it was recorded, and so therefore you'll have an opportunity to view that. Yeah.
Okay, and the second part of my question is specifically on that. I will view the training, that's fine. Is there anything I need to do to verify that I've done this training?
We will be able, we'll send you the link, so when you go in, we'll actually have that information that you have gone in to view.
Oh,
So
okay,
that,
wonderful.
also, I will say this to you as well. If you have any questions pertaining to that training, forward those questions to us. We'll make sure that the individual will be able to answer your question.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any additional questions? Any additional comments?
May I point out, I know Dottie Bettisy is keeping track of the people who are attending, and I did notice that Usman Gay I saw his name pop up. He wasn't here originally. I just wanted to make sure he gets, credit.
Okay. Thank you very much for saying that. As a matter of fact, to verify, I will say the DFOB new members: Usman Gay. Usman Gay.
Yes, President.
Okay. Kanika Harper.
Present.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Then for the COB new members: Christine Brooks, Jennifer Whitaker, Derek
Present.
Kilgore. Okay, Derek Kilgore.
Present.
Derek. Okay, and Keith Rose. Keith Rose.
He was here earlier, I believe. You may check with Ms. Bettisy, but I swear I thought I saw his box.
But all those who were able to attend this evening, if they want to review any of the previous training sessions or tonight's current training session, we'll make that available. For those who have missed, I will send out an email and make sure that they also get the same training as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Any other questions? It is now 5:57 p.m. Again, I'd like to thank our presenter for the excellent information he provided with us this evening. Since there is no other concerns at this particular time, I would like to say that it is now 5:58 p.m. and we can adjourn this training session. And I'd like to say on Monday, again, we have another training session coming up on Monday. So you'll get a reminder email. So that way, hopefully everyone will be able to attend the one on Monday. And again, if you're not able to attend, we'll make sure that you get that information. Thank you.